Millionaires are made. The show where we believe you can be a millionaire in all six aspects of health. So we share tips to improve your physical, your mental, intellectual, social, spiritual, and financial health. Today, we're focusing on one of my love language topics, cash flow. So this is a financial topic, obviously. If you've never seen Millionaires Are Made, look, we're built on the fundamental belief that every person you meet knows something that you don't. And there is something to be learned from everybody. And I think everybody is looking for more cash flow. Now, also, look, in the spirit of authenticity, we don't talk about tips or advice before the show starts. We keep it real. This is a live show. There's no bias, no persuasion, just three awesome people sharing their life journey. I don't even know any of these guests, so I'm excited to meet them with you guys as well. Let's get our first guest on, Patrick Rude.
Hey, Josh, how's it going?
It's going good, Patrick. How about you, man?
Hey, I can't complain. Every day this side of the dirt's a good day.
There you go. There you go. Yeah. So for our audience and everybody watching here on our podcast, Patrick, tell us, who are you?
Absolutely. So, my name is Patrick Rude. I am originally from Michigan. I am the owner of Rude Financial Services. We're a full service tax and accounting firm, and I am affectionately known as the Tax Wizard. Um, Thanks to 6ABC Philadelphia. The business primarily focuses on small business entrepreneurs under 30 million annual revenue. Personally, I like to stick this feather in my cap that I'm a Guinness Book of World Record holder. I've been published in Forbes multiple times, and I am a 6-time international best-selling author.
Nice. Very, very good kind of resume there that you've got for us. Now, I'm
I've
sure
done
with a
some
resume,
things.
yeah, with a resume like that, you've got to have a great tip for us and our audience here on how everyone can improve their financial health with cash flow. So, if you had just one tip you could give, man, what would your tip be?
If I had just one tip, it would be what gets paid attention to grows, right? As entrepreneurs, we have a hard time paying attention to everything that goes on in our life. And oftentimes, since finance is one of those things that is not taught in schools, we're not given a lot of public education around it. It ends up being one of those mysterious things. That's why we have so many people that are drowning in debt and struggling to, live, beyond paycheck to paycheck or invoice to invoice or what have you. But the main thing is if you take the time to educate yourself about how cash flow works, how finance works, do the due diligence of budgeting, and really go back to the basics. I'm not necessarily a big football guy, but Lombardi often said, "Go back to the basics. Focus on the basics." And if you do that, if you give yourself a good foundation, then you have somewhere to grow from, right? You've got to put that foundation in place financially, and the tools to do that are, number one, pulling your head out of the sand about it, which is hard to do. It's scary, but if you want to get a handle on it, you're going to have to pay attention to it. You got to give it some love, right? Um, and secondly, you got to make a budget. Not many of us are good at making personal budgets, and even fewer of us are good at making business budgets. You have to make sure that you are putting things into buckets, that you're putting things on line items, and that you're not only focusing on what you're spending, but you're focusing on what you're earning as well. That would be the third thing I would say, just to encapsulate it, is don't just focus on where the money's going. You have to focus on where the money's going, but you also have to focus on what and how much money is coming in and where it's coming in from. Because then once you get a handle on where the money's coming from, you can diversify.
Yeah. Okay. So tell me, where did you kind of come across this tip in your journey?
Lots of pain and suffering.
Yeah.
Being a tax focused guy, that's where this attention to detail comes from, right? I was very fortunate in the fact that I got to grow up in an entrepreneurial home. My father became a entrepreneur after becoming one of the best plastic extrusion engineers in his field. After 30 years in the business, he went out on his own. And when me and my sister were young, he started his own business manufacturing auto parts in southern Michigan for Ford, GM, Chrysler, Honda, Hyundai, all the big auto manufacturers. We made fan shrouds for Ford. We made parts for the Chevy Avalanche, all kinds of things, right? And I was able to watch his journey in business. But unfortunately, I was also able to firsthand witness a spectacular failure in business at the same time. My father made the poor choice of involving family into the tax and accounting side of the business. And fortunately, there was no embezzlement or anything like that. Nobody did anything wrong, but work just didn't get done. And eventually, the IRS came and put a lien on everything my father owned and closed his business overnight because he wasn't paying attention to the finances.
That's
He
a
didn't
hard-won
have
lesson, man. Yeah.
it. It really is. Fortunately, my father got out of it. He sold the business to one of his customers out from underneath the IRS, and then went to work for them, running his business to pay off the IRS. But it was so stressful going through that situation that he ended up in the hospital with a mild heart attack and mini strokes. And it really took a toll physically on him. And the one of the reasons that I got into accounting to begin with, because of that, was there was no one in the accounting field or the accounting industry that was willing to help my father navigate that situation with the IRS and help him stay in business.
Mm.
So that's where that financial foundation and paying attention to where the money is coming in and
Yeah.
a tax
Well, great. Thank you so much for the great tip. We kind of lost you on the audio there on a little bit of that end, but I definitely want to bring you back on for a round robin and talk to some of our other guests here. So, Patrick, thank you. We'll talk to you here in a second. Introducing our
Thank you,
next
John.
guest here, Laresa McIntyre.
Hi, Josh.
How are you today, Laresa?
I am awesome. And I hope you're doing well too. I hope everybody else is doing great.
I'm doing fantastic. Like Patrick said, I'm on the right side of the grass today. So, for myself and for the other members of our audience, though, tell us, who are you?
Yeah. So my name's Laresa McIntyre. I am a fractional CFO and founder of Rockbridge CFO. So I was a corporate CFO for 15 years, and I decided to strike out on my own. I wanted to help more than just one founder at a time with their business. And certainly the fractional space gives me the opportunity to work with multiple businesses and helping them get the control and clarity over the financials and giving them the insights that they need when maybe they can't afford a full-time CFO, but they need they need that help.
Yeah, excellent. Well, in your position, I'm sure you've seen lots and lots of ups and downs with cash flow. But out of all your experience here being a corporate CFO and then multiple companies now as you are, what would you say if you had to pull just one tip to talk about cash flow? What would it be?
It would be to make sure you're doing a cash flow forecast. And the
Mm,
reason I say that is I've seen numerous situations where companies get themselves into trouble because they don't have a clear visibility to where their cash position is 6, 7, 10, 12 weeks down the road. without that visibility, it's really easy to find yourself in a situation where you don't have the cash available for the things that you really need to focus on, things like payroll. The worst thing a founder can be in a situation is where they're facing payroll and they're looking at their bank account and they're going, I don't have the funds to be able to do that. Now they've got to try and figure out how they're going to pay their people, how they're going to pay their bills. With a cash flow forecast, they're able to get that visibility so that they can start making some plans and making adjustments to what it is that they're spending so that they can maintain their business and make sure that they're healthy from that perspective.
Yeah, I even know personally, facing down how I'm going to figure out payroll and, not having the money. I feel like a lot of people get caught into that scenario and get forced into things like MCA loans or, just horribly high interest rate, high risk type of stuff to keep a business alive. So I very much appreciate that comment from a personal aspect, even having been there myself. So,
Yeah.
but tell me kind of how you came by this. Where have you picked this up along in your journey?
Well, I've walked into a business and I remember it vividly the first day. I walked in and I said, okay, give me your financial statements, give me your open AR, your open AP, so I can kind of take a look to see where you're at. And I got a laugh from them. And they were like, well, first of all, we haven't closed our books for 3 months. And second of all, we don't pay anybody right now from an AP perspective because we don't know if we're going to be able to make payroll next week. And I think when you hear something like that, it's really eye opening and you go, okay, let's do a reset. And that's when you start asking a lot of questions about what does your cash look like? Do you have a list of like those one-time expenses that maybe you're not even thinking about? All of these questions start coming up when we're in that situation. And had they had that cash flow forecast, they would have had a much better understanding of where they could have maybe pulled back on paying vendors and been prepared to be able to make that payroll the next time.
Yeah, awesome. Well, I'm 100% in agreement with you, and that's your story of how you came across it is like you probably see my face. It's like a horror story from a business owner, or
Yeah.
entrepreneur perspective. It's like if you don't know and hadn't closed your books in 3 months, like you're in a big bind, right? So I'm
Yeah.
glad you were able to help them, kind of dig out of the ditch, so to speak. And I'm excited to get into our conversation of all together here at the end, because it seems like you and Patrick almost have like a little bit of a different perspective timeline wise, where Patrick was talking about paying attention to the now and being present in the moment. And you're kind of talking about looking ahead and being future forecasting. And I think both of those things are very, very valuable. So thank you for your insight. And again, I'm excited for the round robin. We'll send you backstage and bring out our final, last but not least guest here, Joseph Drollshagen. How are you doing today, Joseph?
I'm doing great, Josh. How are you doing?
Good, man. Just out in the world causing trouble, loving getting with these guests and learning about some cash flow, man.
That's what we do, man. What a great panel here that you have. Like listening to everybody, it was really and where I come in. It's funny the way this is so well rounded, because where I come in is nothing happens until somebody makes a sale. So I'm all about rapid revenue growth, but doing so in a way. So often people get into business and they want to hit the $1 million, the 10 million, 100 million, whatever it may be, and above that, but they want to kill themselves to do it. And so it actually, we have evidence now where it takes longer to grow that business when we get into that rapid place and doing all those things. So everything I do today, I've learned from my own brokenness. And it was only setting out to try to fix myself that all this has come about. I've been selected as top business coach for the last 5 years based on the results of my clients. I've been featured at NBC, New York Journal, CBS, Fox, all of those and such. And really what I do is I've developed a method called the SMT method that we could talk about in the book in a bit, because I just came out with a book on it. And it's really about helping people get into that alignment place. So yeah, you do have to do the forecasting. You do have to be present in the present moment and stuff, but you can grow your business at a quicker pace by not putting going at 150 miles an hour. And I've helped over 700 clients to achieve such success in their life by, applying the tools the other two panelists discussed, but then also getting into that mode or that alignment place of allowing that growth to happen and stop blocking it. So everything I've done has been around the subconscious mind, has been my studies, my doctorate degree and such, has been around the neuroplasticity of the brain, but also like as far as specifically in that subconscious. And we know today 85% of the results that we experience are determined by that programming within the subconscious. So when I was in my 20s and struggled financially, regardless of how much income I had coming in, I had to understand that and then shift that. And that's become what the SMT method is now, and helping people to really break through how quickly they can scale. But also just as important, because we all talk about money, but we see finances as being freedom. And yet we're so willing to trade off that freedom until we supposedly hit that mark. And in doing it that way is why we see so many people go their whole life and never achieve that level they want to get to. So there's a way to blend that together and be able to enjoy what's happening as it's happening, which is living in the present, while we have that vision for the forward momentum and growing into it.
Now, look, I'm sitting here getting chills while you're talking, because I consider myself, and I kind of made up a little bit of a term here, a somatic salesperson, right? Like I get so aligned that people come to me, and my mentors very early on told me that same statement of like, nothing happens until a sales happen. You have to get the wheels turning. You have to get things going. And kind of even in the same breath of that, I fired a client that was a very big client, but just ultimately wasn't profitable, wasn't in alignment, just a horrible person to deal with in a lot of cases, right? For all aspects of it, from accounting down to, how they were treating people even. So, I definitely appreciate your tip. Tell me a little bit about like where your experience comes from. Like, what's your story?
Yeah. So I grew up in a very low income blue collar family in Detroit, Michigan. And so I watched struggle displayed continuously day after day, all the time growing up. And then I at one point I thought, man, I'm not going to live this way. Something's not right here. And then I got into my 20s and I started repeating those same patterns and behaviors through an act of God, really, as I ended up in corporate America, from blue collar into white collar and in sales. And I struggled. I would travel 3,000 to 4,000 miles every week trying to build territories and barely getting by. And then as I started trying to understand what was going on, diving into things and continuously learning and growing and trying to understand why I was broken, is how I stumbled upon the subconscious and how that applied. And as I started doing so, within a year, I started landing contracts at $18 million, $22 million. And these are year-over-year contracts. The highest one was a $25 million year-over-year contract that took an organization from $50 million to $75 million overnight. And it was just applying these things. So then I made it to a vice president of sales at 28 years in corporate altogether. And I started utilizing these tools that worked for me to elevate my sales personnel up to, so I would end up having a highest level of top producers on a sales team as the companies had ever experienced before. And then at one point, then I ended up I didn't plan to do this, but I ended up getting into helping companies in bankruptcy back to profitability. And that's where all my gray hair comes from, Josh. And that was such a hard life. At one point, I decided I love helping people get that elevation going, but I don't like all the other stuff that's the other hats you have to wear as being a vice president of sales for an organization. So I resigned down, and now I work with business owners. I work with corporate America and stuff, and help help take businesses, from $7.5 to $20 million or $22 million in 12 months. And it's all about rapid scaling. And it's funny because it's opposite of our programming. Is one of the things I do with every client I work with is the first thing I have to do is get them to scale back a little bit, because we're so conditioned to go harder and harder and harder to hit that number. And if we don't make it, then we go even harder at it and stuff. And it's complete. And we see such downward results by the more effort we put in. So it's getting that alignment place going. It's getting a very clear idea of why do you want this business? What does money mean? How does it apply in freedom of your life? And then start living that as we're going through that growth curve.
Mm. Yeah, look, at that note, I want to bring everybody else back on here for the round robin as well, because you really touched on something, I think, that Patrick mentioned very early in his interview as well, is that, and even Laresa had said something about you have to have that base, right? Like you have to have a platform you can jump off of before you can really leapfrog into a $50 million or $15 million contract, right? If you're only prepared to handle a $150,000 contract, once you jump into a 15 or $50 million contract, it is a whole different world, right? And the infrastructure that's required to kind of combat some of those things becomes just phenomenally different, right? In a lot of ways, from both a cash in perspective, what we're talking about cash flow here, but also a cash out perspective, because you can catch a leak real quick on a larger contract like that if you don't have the correct pipeline set up in and out. So I think that from what all of you guys have said is kind of a unifying factor here of like keeping that flow right and moving it kind of like a kayak on the river, right, is going to make sure that everything goes smoothly and you're really enjoying yourself. It's when you don't prepare for the rapids coming up that you really get off in the weeds and the trees, and now you're dealing with poison ivy and everything else, if we want to use that same river analogy.
No, absolutely, Josh. You said it really well. I mean, the planning is a thing. Like what she said about the forecasting and being able to look ahead. You can't do forecasting if you don't know where you've come from. You have to establish your baselines, right? You got to plan out the trip ahead.
Yes,
Absolutely.
yeah,
And two, a lot of times what I find is people, they plan out, but they forget things. So that's why one of the first things I have founders do is sit down and say, okay, let's look over the past year. Where are those one-time expenses that you're going to forget about when you're doing that cash flow forecast? And make sure you're making a list and when they're going to be happening. Like that annual renewal for a software piece, software, subscription that you have, if it's a significant sum of money, that can really put a crimp in your whole forecast and where you stand from a cash perspective. So it's that base and making sure you understand where you've been and applying it to where you're going is so important.
yeah, and even that, yeah, this is a great conversation, you guys. Even that scaling of that, and when it happens, I have clients that will come to me and they'll go, well, I want to be at $100 million. I'm at 50 million now. I want to be at $100 million. So should I start bringing people on? I always tell them no, because you don't want to waste the funds you have. There's going to be useful purposes for those. So it's a timing of when we do that. Bringing, like you said, bringing from 7.5 to $22 million, that's huge growth for an organization. So how we handle that growth and when we implement and when we bring up and to scale up and things like that. But so there are times, what I tell people is if you want to scale your business, if you really want to get to that level, you got to be a little bit comfortable being uncomfortable for a little while. Because you don't want to put all kinds of money out and drain what you have available to you to get that growth happening. So you want to do it simultaneous with it. But if you move through it systematically, it doesn't have to be as upsetting or as, there's going to be uncomfortableness to it, but it doesn't have to be something that's, somebody ends up on anxiety medication overdoing. It can still be enjoyable going through that process.
Well, and the way to make it really
on the panel, I'm sorry to interrupt, Patrick. I love how everybody on the panel nodded when you said it's going to be uncomfortable, right? Like, I think we've all been there at some point, either personally or professionally, where, I always say it's the ramen noodle days, right? Like we're scaling back here a little bit. Doesn't matter what it looks like on the outside, but internally, you've got to keep that. I also want to kind of throw out some questions here from our audience. Mike Penny Morris here says, what habits or routines do you recommend for tracking income and expenses consistently? I
would say do a daily bank reconciliation. I know a lot of bookkeepers and accountants, they'll do a bank rec at the end of the month. Well, you know what? You may be like way in the weeds and you've completely missed something. I always recommend doing a daily bank reconciliation. There is nothing wrong with doing that. It takes 5 seconds sometimes, but at least you've got the visibility about what's going on and you're not at the end of the month going, what happened?
Yep. And if you're still using spreadsheets to track things, stop it. Stop it now.
I personally have seen and been a part of a couple business sales where the whole organization was nothing but a Google sheet, and like just mind blowing. We're talking about, $8 to $15 million revenue company here with an EBITDA of like 7 to 800K, right? And so that people can even get to that on just a spreadsheet is really, really crazy. Mike followed up here actually in the comments as well. Is there an app or something that you would recommend, Patrick?
There's a lot of options. I mean, Intuit's one of the biggest players out there as far as QuickBooks between self-employed and things like that. But there's also FreshBooks, there's Wave Apps, there's Oracle for some of the larger players out there if you like a lot of flexibility in your reporting. But anything as long as you're using something, right? I always recommend people be as cost effective as possible. Oftentimes you can find an accountant that will give you wholesale pricing on a QuickBooks subscription or something to that effect. QuickBooks also has multi-entity discounts. So if you can pay full price for one and then $5 for each additional business sometimes. So there's different things that you can do. But as far as apps, those accounting apps are generally the most versatile. I also like to, from a tax perspective, like to recommend Mileage IQ as an app for people to track their mileage a little bit easier. Things like that are definitely going to help you out.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think it also depends.
Personally, for sure. Sorry, go ahead,
Yeah,
Laresa.
I think it depends on how complex the business is too. I mean, sometimes you want to get into being able to track things on multiple dimensions so that you can get some really great insights. QuickBooks is great and some of those smaller programs, but if you want to get into a lot more granularity, my big one that I love is Business Central, which is a Microsoft product because it ties so well in. If you're in a Microsoft shop, it ties in with your Outlook and your Excel and all of that stuff. So it's a really good option as well. And it's not that expensive.
Okay.
Yeah, and I've seen companies, I know you said that about with the not using spreadsheets and stuff, but I've seen companies starting out and stuff, and they did use spreadsheets, and at least they were doing it then, and then as they grew, it grew into bigger things. So I don't ever knock that. I know what you're saying, running a $50-100 million organization on a spreadsheet probably isn't going to work really well for you, but starting out like that, it's better than nothing at all.
True.
I'd agree with that as well. I think that like everything's got to scale in its due time, right? And going back to the platform we're talking about, you've got to have your platforms and your pipelines set up to keep that cash flow steady. And if all you can figure out at the time is a Google sheet or an Excel sheet, great. But, I also think that there's times, especially if you get over $1 million in revenue, you should be looking at something. I personally have a business that's much, much less than $1 million revenue. I use the Wave app. It's free. My accountant logs in and handles all that stuff too. It's totally great for me. I probably won't ever go to QuickBooks because I just didn't ever learn any of that. And if I wanted to get bigger in my business, exploded, which it's set to do here in the next 2 or 3 years, I'm calling Laresa, right? Like I'm hiring the CFO to go set up the systems for me. So although I'm not necessarily the expert here, I would also say like rely on your experts, and anybody here watching. I'm sure that any of our experts here today on our panel would be happy to talk to you about, your tax situation or a CFO situation or a sales situation in Joseph's case. to kind of go forward. I also want to address this other one to you directly, Joseph. It says, what book would you recommend for someone who wants to learn about financial health for the basics? Maybe one that you followed or often shared with others. I know you mentioned you've got a book coming out. Can you show us that?
Oh yeah, I got it.
That book you got there?
Yeah.
So, and we'll make sure to have the comments and a link to the book here as well, so everybody can jump on and grab it. You know, we definitely think that supporting our guests here and helping people get in. Tell us a little bit about kind of what your book touches on, though, specifically.
It's all about that reprogramming. Remember, I said we know today 85% of the results we experience are determined by the programming in the subconscious. So this is all about, and it's really what I take my clients through. I've developed the SMT method, which is subconscious mindset training, and it's all about getting into alignment with what we want. So I talked about that backing off some, you know, when I first start working with somebody, and it's getting the clarity of the alignment of what is it we really want to achieve here. And then we start looking, you know, we talk about the whys and things like that, but we get a lot of clarity around what that looks like. How do we live in that? What's that, you know, again, the freedom that comes with it. And we start targeting that ahead of time, and it makes that pathway, all of a sudden things will just start coming up out of the blue that we'll start noticing, you know, opportunities, or we cross paths with somebody. We all experience those things. People call them coincidences. I call them God winks, whatever you want to call it. But that can happen by design. It's not every once in a while it can happen, but it only happens when we get into alignment with the mission we're on and where we want to take that, how far we want to take that to.
Man, I think that's a phenomenal point and a great place to kind of wrap up our show. Thank you guys all for being on today. You know, for our audience, we're going to have the links to Dr. Joseph's book. We're going to have everybody's social links here and everything. I also want to take a moment to thank our sponsors for even making this show possible, and everybody for being here live. Some of our sponsors are Sarah Mag Jones, my good friend Lori Velasco, Brian K. Knight, and Brian Pirana. So thank you guys so much for being on, and thank you for watching Millionaires Are Made.
This is awesome. It was awesome being on with you guys too.
It's great.